All right, welcome, greetings. This video is going to be about the fire millage. And I thought about shooting, you're seeing a weird picture-in-picture thing because I'm going to show my screen. I don't like getting on things like Facebook on the office computer because I like to keep those worlds a little separate if I can, but I can't because, full-time 24/7 thing here. And no one wanted to do like a debate because I wanted to set up maybe like a podcast style thing like I did before in the boardroom, but no one jumped on that opportunity, which I completely get. I don't like the political stuff, and I'm a politician right now all the time, so I completely get that. But I wanted people to be able to see like the packets that I'm going to show, the fire reports and those types of things, and then the discussion that's happened on Facebook on these posts too, because I want those different points of view, that controversy to come out so people can debate it, discuss it, go hear the arguments and then go talk to other people about it, right? And see what they think and see what makes sense, essentially, in the situation. And so I want that conversation to take place. And I thought about shooting it in the boardroom just myself, like I do with some of the other stuff, or just at the computer. But I want people to be able to see this stuff on the screen. So that's why it's coming across picture-in-picture like that. If I minus this, it should show a little better. And so I get the board packets out. If we have board meeting on Monday, they used to come out on Friday before me, right? And I don't like that. If I try to think, if I was a trustee, would I like more time? Yes, I would like a little more time. But then realistically, how early can I get them out? And so I get them out the Wednesday before the Monday meeting. Decent amount of time. Post it all publicly online and everything the same day. Shoot a briefing video and then record the meeting and then do a debriefing meeting afterwards. Video afterwards. And so it's a release of a ton of information. And I'll show how Municode is on here too, because we have hundreds of documents up on there, and we'll keep getting more up on there as well. So I posted this on March 8th. It's just a link to the board packet, right? And so if you click on the link, you get this board packet for the March 13th meeting. And so this has a bunch of different stuff on it. It's a full board meeting. There was tons of stuff in here. The controversies about the Central Road paving project, the extension for Thunderbird. There's a sewer increase. There's contracts with the Road Commission and Cedar Creek and all sorts of stuff happening on here. But the first two things are the Fire Millage Renewal, Resolution 2023-12, and Fire Millage Increase, Resolution 2023-13. So those are the two things that we're talking about in this discussion right now. So based on that posting on that link, right, Rory come across and said, I would like to see the data that has been used to determine why a fire increase is being put before the voters over the past few years to present time. You mentioned in your video the use of our fire services for medical calls, a breakdown between medical calls, actual Dalton fire calls, vehicle accident calls, and assist to outside agencies would be helpful for voters to determine if this increase is actually needed. Also, I heard you make mention of possible full-time fire positions due to a lack of interest in today's younger generation. I'm assuming you are referring to attracting candidates to make a career in Dalton Township, but outside of the disproportionate amount of money the fire chief makes, and as compared to other Dalton staff, how is the township prepared to offer a new full-time employee enough money to keep them in our township? Ultimately, I was under the understanding that our goal was less government, not more. Has our position changed? The R he refers to, I think is weird, so I don't know if he means me and him, which would not be correct. So he should have said I, but nevertheless. Or has my position changed if he's questioning himself, something like that. But nevertheless. So the fire chief makes a decent wage, and he came here for really cheap for a bunch of years. Rory makes a good point here, right? Of can we offer enough money for someone to have a career in the fire service here? And so I would say there's a little bit of a contradiction here, right? And the one contradiction is, are you saying we should try to get more money so we can have higher wages so that someone can make a career here? Because I'm trying to keep it, decently reasonable. That's the ask for the 0.85 mils, right? So it's 85 cents out of every $1,000 of taxable value on a property, and I think that's a pretty reasonable ask. So there's that there. And then, if the goal is to make the government less and you're just counting the fire services, then obviously the logical conclusion of that is why don't you just cancel fire services and let people figure it out on their own? And I think that's probably a bad direction to go. That's my view on it. And then the breakdown in this is that it already exists, right? And this will be part of this conversation. So if we go to the board meeting packet, you can see if you scroll through, right, we got the past meeting minutes, we got everything we're doing. I don't know of another government that releases all of the information like this. It's very unusual. This is because I am odd and I wanted to do this, to release all this information because of my idealism about the ability to have conversations and government to be transparent, basically. And so we've got all of the paying of the bills in here and all of that type of stuff. If we get past this, we get to the monthly fire report, which comes out monthly in each of the board packets, which are posted on here since I've been in office. So we're working on getting more information from before I've been in office, but I wanted to get a lot of the information, preferably all the information up since I've been in office. And we've gotten the main stuff. We're still adding stuff from the Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals, and then we'll go back as far as we can on that. And so there's a monthly report, there's a little written section, and then there are graphs for people that like pictures. So the time of day and the day of week they just switch around. There's not a very useful pattern as far as I can tell. But this is directly the information that he was asking for. There's 29 EMS calls, good intention calls were 5, fire calls were 3, hazardous conditions calls were 5, false alarm was 1, service calls are 6. And some of these types of things, like the hazardous conditions and whatnot, those are things that could turn into fires, right? If you get gas leaks or downlines, stuff like that can turn into fires. So the fire thing ends up being relatively small, the direct fire stuff. And I think this might be part of a misunderstanding of, you can do away with the fire department going to medical calls, right? But you better hang on, like an ambulance will eventually get there, but it's going to be a lot longer than our response times this month, which this is always in here. 90% of the time we have to be under 10 minutes. Our average for this month was 6 minutes and 51 seconds. So it's a very good response time. And I think anyone that knows, and Rory should know this, being a former cop, that the ambulance companies, the EMS industry is struggling, especially in this area, and even getting to calls, even high priority calls, in a reasonable amount of time. It would seem like an odd position to me to say, cut fire going to medical calls. But some people do say that. Some people do believe that and push for that. So it's a thing. All right. And then Renee responded, I would like to personally invite you to go to Chief Alan Stiles and sit down with him. He is the one to address with your questions. P.S. We miss you at the township meetings. Rory responded, yeah, I don't have time. Have that kind of time. It's not up to me to seek out answers like this when the township is the one asking for our money. These are simple questions that, quite honestly, you as members of the board should already have the answers to prior to putting this in front of voters. Renee says, we support our fire chief and his decisions. Wish you did too. We already have listened and we support his efforts. Rory responds, that's great, nothing wrong with that, but let's also be smart and informed. Public service historically always asks for more and more money, for more and more. You're asking the public for money and obviously have zero data in front of you to make an informed decision. I know lots of great people who I trust, but wouldn't do a GoFundMe campaign without having knowledge as to why I'm doing it. And so this is a lie that is just common. And I think people trying to win political arguments and stuff, we just see it pervasive. And obviously our culture is super rough, in very rough shape, right? Basically destroying itself, ripping itself in more than half, right? In more pieces than that. But the zero data, we see the data on calls every month, literally the data is asking for, and then there's annual reports, right? And we'll get those because I have a couple of them pulled up. They're on Munico too. And so just to let people know, right? It's civicsplus.com/Municode. Now Civics Plus and Municode were merging when I was getting the township signed up and registered with Municode to get this information up. So if you go to municode.com, it redirects you there, civicsplus.com/Municode. you go to the code library, and then you can click whichever state you want. They have governments all over the states that are on this, that put information on here. You click on Michigan, it's the mitten. You go to D, Dalton Township is right there, first one, Dalton Township in Muskegon County. And so we have our code of ordinances, also called our general ordinances. We have our zoning, also called zoning ordinances, and then Munidocs. And so a bunch of different stuff in Munidocs here. Obviously minutes, agendas, budgets, resolutions, forms, miscellaneous documents, audits, plans, putting more and more on there. We have hundreds up now. And so this is where I got the board packet, right? You go into the agendas, into the board of trustees, agendas, meeting packets, go to your year. I've got them in since I've been in, and I obviously came up with the idea of reference packets. So essentially invented that because I wanted to put out more information than anyone wanted. So I created 2 separate kinds of packets. But so you can get to all of that information there, right? And then I also have in miscellaneous documents, I have the 2 fire department reports that have come out since I have been in office. Same as everything else, we work on getting more stuff up on there as well. And so the fire department reports, let's see, I have multiple of the same thing open just for showing you how to get there. So we have 2022, there's 20 pages of data on this stuff in 2021, right? And so it's similar. It breaks down all this information. There's a bunch of writing on the information on an average of 2.78 calls per day, all of that type of stuff. You can check, you can read that as much as you want. Obviously, those publicly posted, so you can go through that, break down of who we've had on duty, who has changed out as far as personnel could be considered, the structure of the organization itself, the types of calls, the definitions of what they are. Right, and then a breakdown, pretty detailed breakdown of what the fire calls actually count as, what they're coded as, and then the totals as we go through too. Right, and so here's our rescue and emergency medical service incident. On that type of stuff, that's a more even extreme position. If we weren't going to have the fire department going out with the jaws of life and that type of thing, cutting people out of cars, and our fire department is very good at that, right? They do a lot of training on that. They have very good equipment. They're really set up for it because we have Whitehall Road going through, we have M120 going through, we have the highway going through, so not an extremely uncommon thing, unfortunately. And so it has the condition calls, the service calls, the good intent calls, the false alarm and false calls, the severe weather and natural disaster calls, the special incident types, and totals made here as well. Also incidents by district, right? In Dalton, Cedar Creek, which they pay us to cover 10 square miles of Cedar Creek because they don't have a fire department. And so the calls we respond to there. Lakewood Club, which is the village inside of the township. And so the calls that are there, and then the mutual aid calls too, as well as being broken down by the type of call at those different locations. And so nice little pie chart for anyone that wants to have the picture. It is kind of nice to visualize it in that way. And you can see here a lot of calls, 71% as EMS calls, right? And so that, it's a legitimate concern. That's why we're having the discussion, having the debate. And so, and then fire, good intent, hazardous condition, false calls, and service calls, and weather. So all broken down there. Responses by day of the week. It looks like there's a little bit of pattern headed up towards the weekend. Friday and Saturday increasing, but not as big a one as you would think. And then responses by time of day, kind of similar. There's a small pattern there, but it doesn't seem to be as consistent as you would think. Responses by month. And the department apparatus, so the different vehicles and the breakdown of what they are that we have in service, along with the location that we have, goals for the upcoming year, right? And so I'll go through this one a little faster because it's the same thing, different numbers, updates. Obviously, that's why it comes out yearly. And so there's the 2022 annual report. Same breakdown, a little narrative at the beginning about the goals of the department, about the department itself, the accomplishments that have been achieved, so some highlights there, the structure of the organization, definitions of the types of calls, the statistical breakdown of the count and percentage of calls that we're seeing on different things here. You can see medical call a little different on here. Rescue and medical call is 68.93% this year. The emergency medical service incident, EMS call. EMS call excluding vehicle accident with injury. You can see there is, there's a decent difference there between the total, which falls under medical, 588, and the 416, which are actually just straight EMS calls without injury. And so, difference, as much as you want to break it down, it's pretty broken down in here in service calls, hazardous calls, good intent, false alarm, severe weather, special incident. None of those, preferably we don't have the eyeballs, but they're in here just in case they're going to be. And you can see the calls went down. The last year, 2021, that was the first year this fire department broke 1,000 calls. And you can see in the chart that I'd made, there's this up trajectory over time, right? Now it's not steep. Otherwise we'd be running into very real serious issues getting to all of the calls. And that's kind of the other thing on this. It's like, which I think someone makes the case later of like, well, they're making it to all the calls. Everything's fine. We probably don't want to put the ambulances and the emergency services and fire and police and this type of stuff in a position where it's like, well, they don't make it to every call. Maybe we should look at a solution. Not good, right? Not good in the industry for sure. And so it goes up, but it goes up like the stock market, right? So it ends up being a little jagged in its trajectory up. And the trajectory, because I had drawn this up last year, and we had that steep, that jut up right at the end, and so that's why I created the dotted line in there. I had the computer calculate it, well, what's kind of the average trajectory, and it came right down to what it calculated as the average trajectory, which is up. So this breakdown of that, incidents by district again, you can see that most of our stuff is in Dalton, but we do calls in Cedar Creek and the 10 square miles and in the Village of Lakewood Club and Mutual Aid. And then graph, same type of thing. Responses by day of the week, responses by time of day. Yeah, you can see there's still that little Friday, Saturday uptick, middle of the day makes more sense to have incidents rather than middle of the night because more people are out and about and doing things and paying attention to things, right? So responses by month here. And you can see that changed quite a bit from the year before. Breakdown of the apparatus, the equipment again, the trucks and that type of thing. The firehouse, we just have the one firehouse located in the middle of the township, right? So it's only a few miles to anywhere in the township from there. Goals for the upcoming year. All right, so that's a basic breakdown of the annual report. And so it's just not true that the data is not there. The data is certainly there. All right, and then we have Renee, if you took the time to do your own research, it's been in meetings. And then Rory, all the meetings are in video for me to watch. Yes, you're welcome. Maybe I missed it. Was this information in one of the meetings? I'll wait while you never find this. I'll let you in on a little inside information. I already know the answers to my questions. I'm just seeing if our elected officials are using good judgment and being smart with our tax dollars. I shouldn't have to point out the obvious. And so while you never find this is obviously a lie, because as I just showed you, not only is the information available, we have reports that come out every month in the monthly meeting packets and every year in the annual report, and all of it is publicly posted online. The same with all of the meetings that are recorded and posted on YouTube, and I like doing that as well, so I started that. All right, and so that was the discussion that happened there. And I don't like commenting on this stuff. Obviously, he's replying to me, and it's like, why have a stupid Facebook conversation? Because they usually go like this, right? It's not super great, but it's like, all right, well, if there's some concerns, if there's this debate, essentially, that the fire department shouldn't be responding to medical calls, which I disagree with. I think they should be responding to medical calls, and we really are getting to that point, right, is where the township is increasing and slowly, and there's this lack of interest in the coming generations, and we need to, got logged out of my email automatically apparently there, and phone calls coming in. And so we need to deal with that situation before it becomes a disaster, right? But the people, I mean, have to decide. If the people don't want the fire department to go to medical calls, I think that's a really weird decision, but a possible decision nevertheless. And so it's reasonable to have the debate. And so I had posted, following that, I posted this March 9th, this is the next day. Anyone can contact me to schedule a debate. I'll record and post them on YouTube. My direct office line is area code 231-332-6700, or email supervisor@daltontownship.org. In each monthly meeting packet, there is a fire department report, and there are annual reports each year. I have those since I've been in office posted online. I'm working on getting more posted. So far, several hundred documents are up in total, because I was trying to let people know about Municode and how they can access everything. And so my first post here is a link to the Dalton Township Municode. The second one is a link to the Dalton Township YouTube channel, and so you can see the recorded meetings, things like this, and a bunch of videos. And then I posted this. I ended up turning just the pages essentially that he was talking about with the data into JPEGs. So they come across as pictures, so you can see that, yes, we do have the data. It actually does exist. It's not imaginary. I think it would be illegal for us probably to not have this data and not have it generated. And so the incidents by district, and then the next year, the same thing. And I just put up those 2 pages because those are 2 things he had specifically mentioned. Brian had commented on this, given the data you provided, I do think it would be reasonable to see the fire department pivot to more of a medical role somehow. Maybe that includes advanced training for them, equipment suited more to that role, etc. The actual need for a full-time fire department just isn't there based on the data you're providing, but clearly the need for more medical and EMS support is needed. I support the fire chief, and it really does seem to do a great job, so I'm not suggesting anything other than getting him the right resources to do the job that the township is requesting him to do. And that's very legitimate, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think this is part of the confusion of, like, should we break off a medical service ourselves, right? Like establish an ambulance service outside of the fire department. Now, I mean, that's huge, right? Because now we have to hire several, probably more than 3, which is what I'm thinking for the fire department. Probably more than 3 full-time people. And we have to establish, even if we're going to run out of fire bay, right? And the chief and I had talked about it, and he offered to have an ambulance station in one of the bays. We would clear out a bay for that ambulance so that they could operate out of here. It's good access to the northern portion of the county and stuff. They weren't interested in that. And so I think, it's a legitimate concern. We'd have to add more people, and then we would have to buy ambulances. And then if we operate out of that bay, obviously we're good to go on buildings. If we're not, if we're establishing something else, a different building that they're operating on, we have to do something with property and then establishing another building. So that's a lot. And I think it's this confusion, right? So we put in quotation marks, the fire department. And I think probably what he's pointing out there, and I haven't talked to him about this, but, so correct me if I'm wrong in that, but it's fire, right? Is the fire department supposed to go to fire calls? But we all know that the fire department does a lot more than that. The fire department will cut you out of a vehicle if you're stuck in a vehicle, right? We're not, who are we expecting to do that? Like, the cops aren't coming with the jaws of life. The ambulance isn't coming with the jaws of life. Right? The politicians aren't coming with the jaws of life. The fire department better come to that call, otherwise you're going to have a real hard time getting out of that vehicle. The tow truck isn't coming with the jaws of life, right? And then the medical calls, the fire departments run pretty normally, right? And so, because you can split these off. If you have great ambulance companies and whatnot, and no one wants fire departments coming to medical calls, then they don't have to. And that would cut our calls way down, right? And so we would make our calls very easy in that case, right? But it's a normal thing. And so we're probably getting, I think we get into this in later comments. The fire department is trained according to county policy and state law to medical first responders, called MFRs, right? And so that's right below EMT basic, and then there's EMT specialist, and then EMT paramedic. And so that's different between the states. A long time ago, I went to Baker through EMT specialist, right, through that middle qualification. And you can do different things at each different level, and there's legality to that. And so I think it's true. It would be nice, right, if we can train the firefighters to a higher level. But right now you're expecting, expectations are so unrealistic to think that people are going to come in for they're not amazing wages, right? You can go work a job where you're not on call in the middle of the night and that type of thing for higher wages. So not amazing wages. I did include a $1 per hour increase for the on-call firefighters. But you have to pick up your duty shifts. You have to respond to life and death situations, see a bunch of crazy stuff, right? You have to see people die and that type of thing. And you have to be able to be on call in the middle of the night, drive in and drive out real quick and that type of thing. So, it's not a consistent schedule in your life, right? So it's a hard thing. And then say, all right, we're going to send these guys, we're going to require that all of them go for even more than is legally required by the state and the county. Instead of medical first responders, we're going to send them to a bunch more classes. I took classes for a few semesters to get through the EMT basic and then the EMT specialist training at Baker, and I didn't even go through full paramedic, right? I went out west and did mountain climbing and stuff instead. And so to require that for that position seems a bit unreasonable. Now, if we get the millage approved and we go into full-time, I think a consideration of moving them to something like EMT basic is much more reasonable. But if you're not offering that, it's a hard thing to require. I think you're going to end up with less firefighters, and then we certainly aren't going to be able to make our calls. And our fire department, our firefighters, they do a ton of training, right? I've been to a ton of their trainings, and they have good equipment. They're well trained on it. That's super helpful. And they're hard workers. The people that are attracted to that type of thing are hard workers. Otherwise, you wouldn't be running to fire calls, right? And so they're good, right? They're solid. But if you require the world from them, how they're going to fit that into their life is a reasonable consideration as well. All right. And so next, Rory was responding to me. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeffrey Alexander Martin. I use that name because there's a lot of Jeff Martins in the world, so it sticks out a little better. This is exactly what I was asking you for. So with this data in mind, would it be better to use our resources on additional EMS who are licensed paramedics in our area rather than fire personnel, since only 5% of our fire department's use is actually for fires, whereas 60% are for medical purposes? All right, and we kind of went over my perspective on that. And I responded. I've considered the medical units in the area are struggling. Someone will probably take me up on the debate, and we can chew on it for a while. All right, so that was my response. Rory responded to me that ain't nobody got time to sit down and debate with you, as we all have jobs, families, and lives. These numbers alone aren't debatable. The actual fires that are responded to are combated with mutual aid from surrounding departments. To keep increasing a budget whose use is a very small in number is crazy. This is just foolish thinking. I'm sure the chief and all the men and women on the department are great people, but let's be real and stop fabricating our numbers to justify our existence. So he's accusing me and the fire department of fabricating, lying about the numbers, right, making them up, which is just, it's just ridiculous. We just had this week, right? So 2 of the days we had 6 hours of board review meetings about tax exemptions, and a woman that lives on Riley Thompson. One of her objections was that I have sirens going by my house constantly because of the fire department going out on calls. So it's ridiculous. And compared to other fire departments, as far as I can tell, we err on the side of not padding calls, right? So, it's a ridiculous accusation, but nevertheless, it's politics, so people make crazy accusations all the time. All right, so my response to that is you've lied twice in these threads so far. One, by saying that the information isn't available, and again by saying that the numbers are fabricated. Without the lies, it's a good debate, though. If nothing else, I'll present your perspective on the issue as well. All right, which is what I'm doing. So he said, well, no, I didn't. I asked you for the information, was answered by a member of the board who clearly didn't have the information. Publicly posted online, everyone has the information. And as far as the numbers being fabricated, they 100% are. So, telling us that we're making up numbers again. It's just ridiculous, but politics again. Humans, is one thing I've learned in this job is humans are my view of humans decreased a lot, and I've had people try to shoot me. I've had people try to stab me. I've been successfully poisoned in Africa and left for dead at one point. Made it out, and nothing has decreased my view of humans so much as holding this job. He continues, the chief is citing numbers that don't require a fire response, and this is done by every fire department that I can think of, not just Dalton. The reason this is done is because, as your data clearly shows, the percentage of actual fire response is very, very low. With that being said, department heads count every single thing that happens as a call for service to boost their numbers. These exaggerated numbers are in turn used when they come begging for more and more money. But I'm sure glad you have the data and facts in front of you, as it should make it that much easier to exclude this new taxation on a ballot before voters who have entrusted you to do what's best for our township. And then he responded again, another comment. Here's another one that crossed my mind while we were on topic. Instead of spending $500,000 on a pretty new fire truck for show and tell, why not just spend $40,000 to $50,000 on a new economical SUV to drive all these medical calls? I mean, you had the data the entire time that clearly showed that 60% of the runs are to medicals. Then why not choose a vehicle that's faster and much cheaper to run and maintain? I don't want you to think I'm anti-fire department, because I'm actually 100% in favor of these brave men and women. However, I'm 100% anti-stupid. And another stupid comment, ironically, which is hilarious. But so we have pickup trucks for running to the medical calls, because that is true. You don't have to run a giant fire truck to all of the medical calls, right? Where you're going to be checking blood pressure and stabilizing and stuff, and getting them ready to transport once the ambulance arrives. So that's already done. There's 2 of them over at the fire department. And so the $500,000, the new one that he's talking about is the Squad. And so that vehicle, I believe, is about 20 years old. And so you should replace your vehicles, somewhere in there. So there is this view of just kind of, let the stuff rot and fall apart. And eventually when it fails at some point, then we'll, think about handling it in some way. That's essentially the view being presented here. And so the Squad is specifically designed and made for cutting people out of vehicles and that type of thing, right? Heavy stuff. It's got big, large equipment like Jaws of Life and those types of mechanical devices, a bunch of saws and those things. And that's what it's made for. And yes, fire trucks are expensive. I 100% agree with that. The inflation on them has been insane over the last few decades. All right, and then Alan had responded, the fire chief, Mr. Rott and Mr. Balkamp, please call my office. I will be happy to explain the data. Nothing is fabricated. Our staff is cross-trained in both fire and EMS, so they are dual-trained. We also do drive SUVs and pickup trucks for medical calls, which agreeably is much cheaper than using a big apparatus. The new apparatus is for auto accidents and other special calls. That type of equipment will not fit on an SUV. As for the staffing model, all of the staff is paid on call. They too have jobs, then give up time to help cover calls, including myself, after my regular hours with no compensation, in order to give the citizens quality and prompt service. We have no control over the ambulance company. The issue with trying to make us a higher level will cost more money, and we would need approval from the state and county medical control, which is not a guarantee, as there is a nationwide shortage of paramedics. So again, my phone is always on. I would rather talk one-on-one or as a group than via social media, because that really is not the best way to communicate. Thank you for your comments, and I look forward to speaking with anyone about this. So, and I think Brian had reached out to the fire chief and stuff too. So, appreciate the people that reached out to him to have those conversations. And I even had, there was some controversy about, is the fire chief working enough? Oddly enough, this crazy stuff comes up. And so I had him start recording the hours he was putting in outside of what should be, as fire chief, kind of the business hours, essentially, right? And it's an immense amount. He covers a few firefighters worth of time on his off hours, right? Like the 24-hour shifts on Sundays, a lot of times he covers and stuff like that. So, I mean, it ends up being a ton. And because of, people are always going to accuse people of something. So Roll Regulator responded, so your staff are cross-trained, which is great. So what actually are their qualifications? Licensed EMTs or paramedics? I completely get your staff are on call, men and women from the area who give up their time to come provide a service to our community, which is how it should be ran. You, however, are provided a salary and were given, what was it, almost $30,000 a year here recently to respond when called. There's a nationwide shortage of all workers right now, which I have my political theories on, which I'm not going to get into. I don't think extra EMS is probably needed, as they seem to respond to all of the calls when requested, and my entire point is the fire department should do exactly the same. Respond to calls when needed or perhaps requested by EMS. But here's your chance to sway my vote. Please tell me and other voters what exactly this new taxation will be used for and why exactly you feel that it is needed. The video I watched only said it's needed because your call for service numbers go up and down. So it is not because the call for service numbers go up and down. This is a lie. Because the fire department will be having a hard time covering the calls a bit now and continue into the future. I've been talking about that for quite a while. Why exactly it will be needed. So I've included this in the meeting packets, and these have been in the township and around fire for a while. Been making up. I one for last year, so I had to remake it for this year to update the calls as well. So I had them around for a while. That's the year last year, right? The graph was 1 year less on here, so it's not like a new thing. The last vote on the fire operating millage was 2005. So I think that's important to realize and keep in mind, right? It's like the tax system is horrible, right? The tax system is not good. But if you never have an increase, that's going to be very difficult to keep up with, right? Like, are we just going to pretend inflation's not happening, and population growth isn't happening, there's no new houses, no new businesses, let's just pretend that doesn't exist since 2005 and try to keep up? It's kind of ridiculous. It gets into the whole Headley Amendment, because really the millage rate should be percentage-based, right? Like the 0.85 that for the increase here. The idea of it is 85 cents for every $1,000 of value, except for they roll back the amount of millage so that it's not that high. And when inflation is higher than 5% a year, like this year, then they cap the taxable value on the property at 5% too. So they roll it back from assessed to taxable to keep it under inflation. And then they roll, with the Headley Amendment from, I think, like the 70s or something, they roll the millage rates back most years as well. To try to keep it at those same, in this case, 2005 numbers, instead of letting it increase as the way it should. So it's ridiculous, but nevertheless, that is what exists. So in 2005, there were 632 calls. This flyer says, I made this flyer. In 2021, there were over 1,000 calls for the first time. In 2022, there were 853 calls. Right, that's why we're seeing this, jagged thing go up. And also the central dispatch for the county is reclassifying how they do some of the calls. So, which I know some people aren't happy about that, because they're not getting fire called to some of the calls, which means you're waiting a long time for an ambulance to get there. The flyer continues. The population has grown slightly. Fires haven't increased. What has grown are medical calls. Amazing. Very explicit. The fire department is carrying a heavier burden in emergency services. There are 9,427 people in Dalton Township. That's by the last census. We have 13 part-time on-call firefighters. In 2023, there will be a vote to increase the fire operating millage to add full-time firefighters. Very explicit, right? Like, I mean, it's weird. I think it works to like accuse the government of hiding stuff all of the time, usually, because they don't just put out all of their information. I got a few of these guys that attempt to do this with me. It doesn't work very good because I attempt to just post ridiculous amounts of information, and so it's like, nope, not hidden, very, very explicit, very straightforward, because I prefer to be that way. So cover the cross training in there a little bit. The fire chief had come here for a very low wage. 13 years ago, I believe he started something like that. I believe it was $30-some thousand a year. And so this now he's at $70,000 a year. That's why I didn't propose a raise for him, because a couple of years ago, my proposal initially in the budget was to step him up on wages. But at the annual meeting of the electors, several people wanted to increase more, and so it ended up being increased more, which is why I didn't include a raise this year, because he's at a decent wage, even though he does cover a ton of hours outside, right, way above what you'd consider like a normal 40 hours. But if you get in high performance fields like tech or finance at a high level, normal full time is considered 50 to 70 hours too. So it kind of operates, more like that. Like some normal hours are 50 to 70, and then sometimes more. So. So there's an interesting contradiction here, right? I don't think extra EMS is probably needed. I think that is interesting, because it seemed like before he's presenting, and here too I guess he's presenting the idea of just fire not going to any of the EMS calls, and it's the idea of like they're getting to all their calls. Like, yeah, they'll eventually get to all their calls, right? We could have one paramedic for the entire county. Like, they'll eventually get to all the calls. There's just consequences for those types of decisions for that type of management. So I had to respond to this. I don't like having these conversations through the Facebook comments, but some stuff it's like, it kind of needs to be responded to. And so as per the state and county, firefighters are licensed as medical first responders. As Alan stated, you can contact him to go through those things, like the levels of licensing. Rory responded to me, a first responder is the lowest level of medical training. Maybe it's time to work on getting your employees/volunteers to a higher level, maybe EMT basic, at least seeing that a large majority of their response is for medical purposes. And again, we cycle back around to this thing of, all right, well, we're going to require more, which is going to decrease the interest more, which makes it harder to actually cover the calls, right? It's very ironic. It ends up being a proposal for a downward spiral. And then Rory responded again. Nevertheless, I'm still waiting to hear why we need additional taxation for fire services and what exactly this new taxation would be used for. And obviously, because difficult to cover the calls with what we have now, and that's projected into the future, obviously. Unless you guys, unless you think, hey, the society is getting way healthier, and we shouldn't be going to medical calls very much in the future. But I don't see the society headed in that direction. And what it would be used for, obviously, I've explicitly gone over that. And adding the full-time firefighters, so this would bring in a little over $200,000 more, right? The increase, and there's two votes, right? Because the renewal is a vote, and then the increase is a vote. And so on the ballot, it'll be two separate things, right? To check yes or no on, right? Whichever way you think it should go. And so that's why there's two resolutions in that meeting packet. One is for the renewal, one is for the increase. And so it's going to generate a little ways over, I think, $230-some thousand. The numbers are in there. More per year. I think it was $239,000 more per year is projected, something like that. It depends on what the tax rates do on property to a certain extent, and whatever laws the state changes, because they do that quite a bit as well. And with that, I would like to get 3 full-time firefighters so they can be on a rotation. And then by including the fire chief in responding to things, especially when because then no one can take a day off, right? Which ends up being a difficult thing. So it already incorporates the fire chief. I mean, really, at a minimum, probably 4 people should be added so that rotation can be a little better. But we probably would have had to ask for more money, and I don't want to ask for a ridiculous amount of money either. And so to try to limit that, to try to be economical in the ask on the millage rate, that's the idea, is the 0.85 millage rate. Next, we have Parnell. He had responded to me. Rory already knows this. He was a cop in Muskegon Heights for 17 plus years. And then Parnell had responded to Alan, right on, Chief. My old department was 75% medical, 25% fire, 26 square miles, where Dalton Township is 36 square miles. Plus, we have the additional contract for the 10 square miles of Cedar Creek. Right, so Muskegon Charter covers 8 square miles, and then Holton covers 18 square miles on the other side, so it's split 3 ways. Parnell continues, some people do not even know how much they pay a year for fire service. It's cheap compared to the rest of their tax bill. I would like to see 3 shifts with a 5-man crew, 24 hours, 7 days a week, but that's in the future, and I will support both fire proposals. And so appreciate this. I've major disagreements with Parnell on other stuff and whatnot, but he's always before me and after me. I'm sure he'll support the fire department. So, but he's correct. A 5-man crew, 24/7 is a lot. That would take a lot more money. So that would be a much higher millage rate. And so don't plan on doing that because I think that would be a very big ask. And so if we go back to this, the board packet here, it has the full resolutions in here, right? This is kind of the crazy thing, like people releasing all the full stuff like this is not usually done. I like to do it, so you can read through it on your own if you want. And so we have the wording that would be on the ballot as well, will be in the August ballot. So this vote is in August. And so the first one is this renewal, right? Shall the previously approved voted increase in the Township of Dalton's tax rate limitation imposed by the Michigan Constitution, currently 1.1446 mils, $1.14 per $1,000 of taxable value, be renewed and levied from 2026 through and including 2042 on taxable property in the township to continue to provide revenue for the operation and maintenance of the Township Fire Department. It is estimated that the levy would provide revenue of $366,048 in the first calendar year of renewal. The revenue from this millage levy will be dispersed to the Township of Dalton, right? Yes or no? And so, weird wording, right? Because it's like political, legal, we have a lawyer draw it up, and if it's not worded correctly, then it obviously doesn't count. And so I do not like the way these are worded. But it's a previously approved voted increase. That's 2005, right, was when that was done. And then tax rate limitation imposed by the Michigan Constitution. They're talking about the Headley Amendment because it wasn't approved in 2005 at 1.1446. I can't remember offhand. I do have the number. I think it was approved at like 1.5, something like that. And so they roll that back to keep it off the percentage basis, which makes no sense, right? And so this is the revenue that the Township Fire Department is currently operating as, right? $366,048. And right in there, that's projected on here for the upcoming year. And so if we go through this, operating purposes, right? It's for operations of the township operating. It's an operating millage, right? Because there's a separate equipment millage for the township that the people voted on. I think that was 2017. And so next we have, that's still notices and publications and stuff like that, all included in there. Next we have the fire millage increase, right? And so I do these sheets about what the motions may look like. Depends on, sometimes the board doesn't make the motions in that way. Sometimes they don't make the motions at all. And then kind of a little briefing by me to explain the situation. And then we have this resolution here as well, right? There's a bunch of legal stuff according to what property tax acts and stuff like that, the times the township is open for election stuff, those types of things. All right, and then we get into the motion itself, and this is for an additional 0.85 mils, right? It's synonymous with increase, right? This is the increase portion. So shall the tax rate limitation for Dalton Township be increased and levied in the amount of 0.85 mills, $0.85, so 85 cents per $1,000 of taxable value from 2023 through and including 2042 to provide revenue for the cost of operation and maintenance of the Township Fire Department. This is a new millage which, if approved, would be in addition to the current millage for fire protection purposes. It is estimated that a levy of 0.85 mils would provide revenue of $238,764.31. So I said 239 before. It was close, right? 238,764.31. In the first calendar year, the revenue from this millage levy will be dispersed to the Township of Dalton. Yes, no, right? And so the reason you see the year difference on here is because that renewal is up in a couple of years. So we're extending that one to coincide with this one. Because what I don't want to put in front of voters, because I would think this is weird, right, from my perspective, is if you have a vote on a fire millage increase now, because people are like, yeah, let's add some full-time firefighters, let's cover the medical calls, let's do it, right? And then a couple of years from now, it's like, do you want to renew the fire millage fire operating millage? And it's like, didn't we just vote on that a couple of years ago? Like, why am I seeing it again, right? So that would be a weird thing to do. That's why there's the two things at the same time, and that's why there's a difference in the years. All right, and same type of thing, the notices that have to be put out and the wording on here and that type of stuff. And then it moved on to other items. And so that is the basic situation. Let me see if I can change this over to just being me. I think I can. Pretty close. And so that is the basic situation on the fire millage and the proposals, the resolutions that were passed. So that would be on the August vote. So the ballot in August will have the thing for the renewal on the fire operating and the increase on fire operating. Obviously, completely willing to talk about it with anyone. If you want to call me, my direct line at the office is area code 231-332-6700, or email supervisor@daltontownship.org. Obviously, the fire chief is willing to talk with anyone too. Social media comments are not necessarily a great way to communicate. You know, I'm kind of hoping that this does generate, I don't know what I'm going to call this on YouTube, some sort of Jeff debates himself, right? Semi-debate, maybe I'll call it something like that. On the fire millage, but I'm hoping maybe it generates another discussion, someone to come in and talk it through on one of these videos, and we can have that conversation. There'll be a flyer sent out or a mailer sent out letting everyone know. So like when the township sends out a mailer like that, it's not saying vote yes for this or saying vote no for this. The one that comes from the township will just say this is on the ballot, just letting everyone know, right? So that people that want to vote can go to their location and they can put in their vote on whether they think it's reasonable to do the renewal and if it's reasonable to do the increase or not, right? And so that's essentially a debate that has to occur. I would appreciate it if people talk to each other about it, right? When you're having breakfast, family, friends, whatever, you're at the Overboard, you're at the Full Moon, you're at Northside, you're wherever you are, and you're hanging out with people and say, what do you think of the fire millage, right? So they're making this case, just essentially making this case that, hey, to cover calls now and into the future, we should increase the fire operating expense so we can add a few full-time firefighters. But they could cover their staff if they drop medical calls and whatnot. But ambulance services in the area don't seem to be getting calls very fast. And they cover the medical calls now. Have that conversation. Feel free to reach out to me if you want any of that information. Obviously, I showed how to go on municode.com and see the fire reports and see the board packets and stuff like that. But if people want to figure out how to get to that stuff again, you can email me and I'll just send you the link. No big deal. So this is Jeff signing off until next time, and let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.